I'm recording. Okay.
All right. Okay.
So I'm Will Vann.
I'm Rachel Keller.
And we are going to talk about our experience, our first real experience with coding. We had basically five pieces to do, or so.
Yeah,
Three interviews and then the two articles, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. And what I found when I was doing it, and I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but I had a really hard time really seeing what was the difference. I mean, I know the gerunds because you have the ing and stuff, but between the line by line and the focus coding, I didn't really see what was the difference between the two. So
is as I understand it, and I could be wrong about this, when I look back over it, so the focus coding is kind of like the second step.
Okay.
Where you take it's not called the process, the gerund coding or the line by line, and you dig deeper into that. You take that data that you created, either the line by line or the gerund, and then you pull out more focused data from that.
Okay, so like what we exchanged, your examples that you shared with me and what I shared with you, then the next step would be the focus coding and dig deeper into what we have?
Yeah.
Okay.
As an individual process, yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's the way I tried it. I don't know. So how did you feel about the gerund coding, the process coding? What were your thoughts on that?
You know what? What's funny, William, is that I was like, I like this one. So I wrote myself little side notes and examples of it. And then if you look at my coding, I didn't use it, So I was like, why didn't I use that one? But that one was clear. I understood it. And the line by line now was good. But when I got to the focus one, that I was like, wait, maybe I'm missing something,
Yeah.
So
I didn't really like or find effective the gerund coding. I spent too much time trying to interpret it, to take the data and find a gerund that would mean something when I went back to it.
Right.
For me, I think the line by line was more effective. For instance, like when Eisenberg is talking, I think it's right how to say it. When Eisenberg is talking about the different things that they were trying before they got into real segregation, or not segregation, but integration. So she's talking about the wedge, the pie and the wedge thing.
Right.
And I mean, that seemed like important data, but turning it into an effective gerund for me I'd rather focus my energies on just putting down directly in the line by line something that is meaningful to me.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it ended up that way for me. I really connected it to like a reading strategy, where you're reading and you're kind of off to the side putting your little notes so that you can go back to it. So maybe that's why I went with the line by line, I think.
Can we pause for a second? I've got a phone call. Sorry.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. All right, so we're back.
Okay, so let's look at just, I guess so we're kind of both on the same page and making sure we're coding correctly. Let's both look at what we have coded on page 58.
Okay, I can't tell. Can you see it? Can you see one of your pages now?
Yeah, I can see the page.
I can't tell which one is 58 because the little button is blocking the page number.
Oh, okay. So it'll be at the top. One of the codes that I put was unaware of segregation.
There it is.
That one.
Okay.
All right. So on this one, some of the things that I noted in my coding was the unawareness of the segregation that was happening. And then something that really stood out to me was when they're talking about the teenagers that were protesting at the school too. And it wasn't just, like the parents in the community and stuff that were having issues. It was actually the teenagers too. And I kind of felt that was a good point to bring out in the coding.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I'm writing about this in my paragraphs, but I actually experienced this as a kid.
Really?
Yeah. So when I was in elementary school, we lived just outside, I guess maybe a couple miles outside of the city of Richmond in Chesterfield County.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Chesterfield County schools, and they were attempting to bus some of us into Richmond schools and bus some of the kids in Richmond out to Chesterfield.
Oh, wow.
And it was a big deal. I remember everybody had these stickers they were putting on their car with the little, like it was like a little white schoolhouse, and it had the no busing and like the circle with the slash sign to it.
Uh-huh.
And they were back to some people were back to the Vietnam chant, hell no, we won't go, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was just a kid, so I was just sort of on the sidelines, but
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I think just being as one of the kids, you just kind of go with what you're supposed to do, what your parents are telling you to do, what the school's telling you to do. But to see, these teenage kids that it was affecting them, and they took a stance, and acted out also, to share what they were feeling.
Yeah. Obviously I wasn't as socially aware as these teenagers.
Yeah,
were.
I think
And I wonder what age you start to become, aware. And nothing ever happened, but I also wonder how I would have felt as a child, as a student, getting on a bus and going into the school in the city of Richmond.
Yeah, in a different neighborhood. We kind of experienced a somewhat different thing. The school I grew up in El Paso is predominantly Hispanic, and I could remember, I think I was in 4th grade when we had, all the teachers were Hispanic as well. We had an African American teacher come in, and I remember going home and telling my parents, like, Mom, guess what we have at our school? Like, it was a big deal. And then her kids started going to school there too. And I just remember, like, what a big difference that was. Now, you're just blended in and you don't realize it. But I know in the neighborhood where I grew up, it was just Hispanic. So to have them in there was really different for us, and apparently, obviously, for them too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and getting back to the coding, the author talks about it somewhere in here that you are a part of the coding.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm wondering how much of my experience or lack of experience, I don't know how you want to, it affected what I put down in my coding,
Yeah, I would imagine it does influence what stands out to you, and, that being the actions of the teenagers really stood out to me. So I could see how that does bring that upon us, where our coding is going to be influenced by our experiences sometimes, or maybe even a lack of experience, that's going to stick out for us.
Right.
But when I looked at what you sent me and what I have, I know you use the gerunds, but we kind of had some of the things that I pulled out were the same things that you had in yours. So
yeah. Maybe I went a little bit overboard, but I tried to put every sort of action that was covered in the one piece into a gerund. So I might have, yours looks more like focus coding. You were pulling out things that you saw as important. I don't know. Is that a pretty good?
Yeah, and that's why I was telling you, I was a little bit confused between the line by line and the focus, because I kept telling myself, am I putting too much information in my coding? Am I looking for more than what I should,
Yeah.
So I think that, was important. And I also wonder, like, if I had not seen the newspaper articles and stuff, how would my coding have been influenced then if I didn't have that background of those 6 articles too?
Yeah, that just occurred to me. I wonder, maybe that's something we could talk about or we could write about in our paragraphs. So what does how do you choose which to code first? And does coding one before the other impact the later ones? Am I making sense there?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the newspaper articles, right? And they were probably, I mean, obviously they were written at the time, but they were probably written from a more, I don't know, not as, not a truly lived experience like these other people, but, one perspective at the time, which may or may not have been inclusive of the people that were actually going through this. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you read those first, would that color what you coded in the interviews? Or if you read the interviews first, would that have an impact on what you coded or what you drew out of the articles?
Right, because I really think it has to do with the background. And I remember when I read those newspaper articles, and they're talking about some of the stuff I read in there. I could not believe it was printed in a newspaper.
Right.
So I already had I guess a little anger that this was happening. So I don't know. I think that I was a little biased on what information I was pulling out, but a lot of the theme was the working together or retaliation,
right.
that I kind of found in my coding, the harassment and stuff, which is similar to some of the things that I saw in yours also.
Yeah, which I guess my question is then is as a researcher, how do you keep that from, impacting what you pull out? How do you keep the bias, because it seems like to me that, your reaction and my reactions to the articles that were not very well balanced because they were sort of a primary source of the time, obviously impacted what we pulled out looking at the interviews. So is that a proper way to do it as a researcher, or should you try to maybe write about it maybe in your memos and then try to be more objective?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I wonder now, when we're doing our own research, it's hard not to be biased. We did some placement testing at ASU today, and I'm seeing how they're doing on the particular test, but I know that's not a true reflection of who they are. So it's very hard to have that, to find that balance of seeing it from an outsider and not, not being tied to the research or tied to the student assessment today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have talked about positionality before, but and I mean, that certainly has an impact, but I'm just wondering with the coding, do you make a conscious choice of what you code first, last, that kind of thing? So I don't know, something we can think about. I think that I'm gonna go ahead and stop it here unless you have something else you want to talk about.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So let me stop recording here. I'm going to stop share first and then stop recording.